Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Counsel of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, First Latina Bar President. Today we talk to Aaron Moncibaiz, General Counsel of Goodwill, Central Texas. Aaron is a graduate of Texas Tech and Texas Tech School of Law. He spent his career in public service as an assistant criminal district attorney in Lubbock County, then as the criminal justice advisor for Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and now is at Goodwill, Central Texas. I'm so happy today to introduce you to Aaron Moncibaiz. Aaron, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start at the beginning. Why did you want to be a lawyer?
I didn't. I grew up wanting to be an architect. I got really into architecture. I took some computer drafting classes when I was in high school and got involved with an organization there and went to college to be an architect. In fact, that's what I have my undergraduate degree in. And so law school was never on the horizon until very late, like fall semester of my senior year of undergrad.
And did something happen to make you decide that you liked people better than buildings?
I still like buildings quite a lot. I had a good friend of mine named Ryan Brook who was, he and I started in the architecture program together at Texas Tech. And I believe after our second year, he changed his major to political science because he wanted to go to law school. And we were sitting around one evening and he was studying for the LSAT. And one thing led to another, and I don't know how he did it, but he talked me into signing up for the LSAT like 2 weeks before the test that December. And I grabbed a couple of his study books that he was using and kind of took the LSAT on a whim and luckily scored high enough. I applied to one law school. I had no idea how competitive it was to get into law school. Applied to Tech. I'd already gotten into grad school for architecture. And so I thought, worst case, I'll apply. If I don't get in, I don't get in. I'll go get my graduate degree in architecture. If I do get in, I'll go for a year, see what it's all about. If I hate it, then I'll just defer my acceptance to grad school and I'll go finish that degree. If I love it, I'll finish it out. And so a funny thing happened. I started law school in the fall of 2007, around the time the economy cratered. I wanted to do construction litigation. And the economy cratered. The first thing people stopped doing is building and expanding, and that area of the law kind of dried up. Texas Tech is known for having really great advocacy teams. And I was fortunate enough to make one of our national mock trial teams. It happened to be a criminal law question. Fell in love with it. I got an internship at the DA's office there in Lubbock, my third year of law school, and they offered me a job when I graduated. I just kind of fell backwards into all of it.
And so you went from wanting to make buildings and lots of money to then support buildings with lots of money to now public service.
Something like that, yeah.
How did you fall in love with public service? Because your entire career has been in this public sector.
I had really great parents. My dad was a police officer for nearly 20 years. Majority of the time he worked in Paris, Texas, where I grew up. When you're a little boy and your dad's a police officer, he's your hero. It's the coolest job in the world, right? And so, I was exposed to that from an early age. My mother ran a daycare out of our home for several years. We were active in our church. And really, my sisters and I grew up knowing no better than we are going to do what we can in the communities that we live in. And that can take on several different forms. So I give all the credit to my parents.
Not that it's a competition, but you might have had the best answer for that we've had so far is I had really great parents. So we'll make that like your hashtag because I think that your parents should listen and then know how proud you are to have come from them and learned all you learned. So good job, best answer.
Thank you.
So you fall in love with public sector, and it's really been criminal justice, being a DA, and then you worked for a lieutenant governor doing criminal justice policy. And sort of on paper, Goodwill seems like a pivot. It's still public sector, but in theory, it's not criminal justice.
In theory.
In theory. So how did you find Goodwill?
They found me. They had reached out. Ellen Arnold had been the lobbyist for Goodwill Central Texas for 20 years. And for months and months, and really probably for over a year, she tried to get me to go on this tour of the Coleman unit, the women's prison down in Lockhart. because she wanted to show me what Goodwill was doing down there in that space. And it's a little embarrassing to tell the story, but I came up with excuses for several months on why I couldn't go. And quite frankly, to be honest, I didn't have any interest in going. I'd been into so many prisons as an assistant prosecutor, and in my role with the lieutenant governor's office, honestly didn't think that there was much in going to tour another unit, that it was going to do much for me or do much for what I was trying to do in the lieutenant governor's office. But Ellen was persistent. And when Marion Wallace was appointed deputy chief staff in our office, Ellen got really smart and reached out to Marion and invited her on this tour. And Marion said, I would love to go, but since this is criminal justice related, do you mind if I invite Aaron to join us? And Ellen was like, absolutely not. I think that's a great idea. And so that's how all of that happened. So we set a tour. I think this was in December of 2022, right before the last legislative session. And we went down there and I was blown away. Goodwill operates one of their Excel centers, one of their charter high schools within that prison. And we just had an amazing tour. They showed us exactly what they were doing in that space and shared with us their desire to grow that program out and get into the publicly run prisons. At the time, that prison was run by a company called MTC. They operate about a dozen private prisons in the state. In fact, I think they still run that prison down in Lockhart. But they were interested in expanding into the public sector and partnering with TDCJ and with Wyndham to make that happen. And so we got back to the Capitol, had conversations with the lieutenant governor about this, and we agreed to support that. So we wrote a bill that was carried in the Senate, ultimately got to the governor's desk and created this pilot program that allowed Goodwill to operate in that space. And so I had a really great experience in that process, got very comfortable, got to meet the CEO and several members of their senior executive team. And so once session wrapped up, their CEO, Rob Neville, came at me pretty hard with a job offer that I ultimately couldn't say no to.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about what Goodwill Central Texas does? I think everyone is familiar with the stores and the donations, but there's so much more.
Right. Like myself, when I think of Goodwill, I think of the thrift stores. Currently in the Central Texas region, we operate 36 stores with 2 large outlets as well. So I think we have 38 total retail spaces, but that's a fraction of what we do. If you really think about it, Goodwill is more of like a holding company because we have several different companies that we run in several different entities. So I can just go through the list. We operate a charter high school. We have 2 community campuses here in Austin. And then we operate 5 of what we call our Justice Ed campuses. So these are our charter high schools run within our prison system. We have GSG, which is a staffing company, Goodwill Staffing Group. We have a janitorial company. We have a landscaping company. We do sustainability projects, and that's on top of all of our mission work that we do as well. So our retail operation is a small fraction of what we actually do. And I'm still learning. I've been on the job almost a year now, and I'm still learning things that we do. It's a large organization. We have right around 2,000 employees spread across, I think, a dozen or so different departments. So it's a large operation.
Is there a best way for the audience to support Goodwill?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, come to our stores. 89% or 89 cents out of every dollar that's generated in our stores goes right back into our organization and funding the mission work that we do out in the community. So that's the best way. Even if you're not shopping in our stores, please donate items to our stores. We will put every donation that we receive to good use. On top of that, you can visit our website at goodwillcentraltexas.org and make a donation there at any time. We have a big gala every September. It's called a Good Night for Goodwill. I think this year it's on September 26th. If you're interested in attending, you can log on to our website, buy tickets. If you would like to sponsor a table, sponsor the event, you can do that as well. A big part of that gala is fundraising for what we call our Bridge Fund. And this is a fund of money that we get through donations that we then use for the benefit of our employees throughout the year. So anytime any of our employees run into issues related to, their rent, car problems, if they get behind on utility bills, need help with groceries for the month, anything like that, they can apply for a distribution from the Bridge Fund. And it just helps our employees any way we can with, life's ups and downs.
So you help the community at large, but also you help in-house.
A huge part of our mission work is putting people to work. And that starts first and foremost with our employees, our frontline employees, many of which are employed through our retail stores. Absolutely.
That's great. One thing I learned from chatting with your colleagues recently is some people have things to donate to Goodwill, but they have to be nice enough because nobody wants to donate something that seems broken or not finished or dirty or something. And what I heard is that we should let y'all decide if you want it because you can recycle it.
With very limited exception, we will take just about anything at one of our retail stores. I think every one of our stores has a donation door that you can come up to and drop off your donations. And we have a big push with sustainability. So 80% of our donations that come through the door, we get those back out either through sales or through recycling. We try to send as little as possible to the landfills. And we have a goal to bump that number up to 90% and beyond through sustainability initiatives that we're currently working on. But yes, absolutely. If you have something that is no longer of value to you or that you don't want sitting around in a guest room or out in your garage, bring it to one of our stores. We can put it to good use.
What organizations have meant the most to you professionally or personally?
So that one's pretty easy. The Texas District and County Attorneys Association will always be at the top of the list for me, both personally and professionally. So I got active with TDCA very early on in my career. In fact, just about every new prosecutor that gets hired at any county attorney's offices in the state goes through what we call baby prosecutor school. It's a week-long school where TDCA basically teaches you the basics on how to be a prosecutor. I remember showing up to that school. We had it here in Austin, and I was terrified because they bring in prosecutors from all over the state, and it's a week-long boot camp of this is what you do. This is how you pick a jury. This is how you give opening statements. These are the big relevant rules of evidence and procedure that you need to know. How to do a closing argument, how to meet with your victims and provide services for them, how to build relationship with court staff and your judges. It's a lot of information, but it's that valuable on-the-job training that really laid a great foundation for me on how to be a prosecutor. And so from that point on, I did everything that I could to be active within the organization. They had a great executive director, Rob Keppel, who's retiring at the end of the year. But a couple of years into my career, Rob contacted me out of the blue and invited me to be a part of their long-range planning committee. I had no idea what that meant. I got to come down to Austin, and I found myself at a table with Devin Anderson, who at the time was the elected DA of Harris County. I was there with the elected DA of Dallas County and all of these big prosecutors elected and first assistants across the state. And on our first break, I remember going up to Rob and asking him, why am I here? I didn't feel like that. I mean, I was just a misdemeanor prosecutor in West Texas. had no reason being at the table. And, Rob was great, handled it with a lot of class and said, look, you're here for a reason. Your perspective is important and we want you here. And from that point on, I was willing to do anything and everything for TDCAA. And so I was invited to be a part of the training committee. So ultimately allowed me to travel all over the state and present on many different topics of criminal prosecution. I presented a few times at our big annual conference in September, where there's 1,000+ prosecutors from across the state, which is uniquely terrifying in and of itself. And so ultimately, when the position with the Lieutenant Governor's office became available, Daryl Davila, who's the chief of staff for the Lieutenant Governor, former Tarrant County prosecutor, reached out to Rob and Shannon Edmonds over at TDCAA and asked for a recommendation for that position. And my name kind of got tossed out there, and the rest was history. So TDCAA will always have a big place in my heart. They do tremendous work.
Yeah, they have great folks there. And it's good to know that policy is made by experts in the field. That is not necessarily true in all offices and all leadership positions, but that's great that with this particular position, it's always done by, it sounds like, a former prosecutor.
Yeah. Daryl had a clear direction he wanted to go with that position. Don't get me wrong, that was another job I stepped into and was a little terrified about. I had to learn a lot about the legislative process. I had been in the Capitol since like a middle school field trip. And so, and then on top of that, coming into a leadership office where I didn't have the institutional knowledge of really what was going on in that building. As I'm sure you know, having good policy is not even half the battle in that building, right? You got to be able to navigate the politics of that building as well. So Daryl definitely took a chance on me, just like my first boss, Matt Powell in the DA's office there in Lubbock took a chance on me. And just like in the DA's office, it's sink or swim, right? So you're either going to figure it out or you're not. Luckily, my first session was the 86, which by all accounts was a pretty easygoing session. Allowed me to get in there and get my feet wet and learn the process, and I learned a lot of the key stakeholders. So by the time the 87th and the 88th rolled around, which were a little bit more difficult sessions, I at least had my feet under me at that point.
What's next for you?
Professionally?
Whatever you want to share.
Well, I'm about a year closing in on the 1 year mark with Goodwill. I'm having a blast in that job. One of the things that really attracted me to this position was really being able to expand my skill set as a lawyer. I've kind of had pigeonholed myself a little bit in the criminal justice world, which, don't get me wrong, love that work. Probably some of the most rewarding work that I will do in my entire career. But I like a challenge, and I knew that I wanted to continue to grow my skill set. And this was a position that was going to allow me to do just that. So, short term, I'm looking at taking on more responsibility with Goodwill. Even in the last 10 months, I've already taken on a few more responsibilities that I hadn't planned on. But I'm having a blast doing it, So here just recently, I've taken ownership of our entire real estate portfolio. So we have, a little over 1 million square feet of commercial retail space in that portfolio. So all of the challenges that come along with that, getting to learn a lot about the commercial real estate game here in Austin, which that is something else. Gotten to learn a ton of employment law, good and bad, over the course of this last year. But I'm still getting to do the policy work. So one of my responsibilities is overseeing our lobbying efforts there at the Capitol. So I still feel like we'll be able to still stay plugged in to a certain bit there at the Capitol. So short term, I'm not going anywhere. Long term, I hope to continue to grow within the Goodwill network. It has been very refreshing as I've gotten to connect with others all across the country that work in Goodwill and see what they're working on, issues that they're facing. Everyone has been so nice and opening up their doors and saying, "Hey, we're really good at retail, or we're doing this really great in the loss prevention realm. Come over, come take a look and see how we're doing this." So kind of my goals moving forward.
Medium term, you and I are going to create some sort of general counsel club.
Absolutely.
Where we can just have a support network to call to say, well, I don't know how to do this thing, but I'm the general counsel and I'm supposed to. So
yeah,
we'll start our network.
I'm learning that to be a general counsel, especially for a nonprofit organization, you can't be a master of everything, right? You're a jack of all trades, master of none. So I'm going to continue to need a tremendous amount of help because I don't know everything with every facet of the law, right? And so I know there are things that you've worked on in the past and are currently working on that will be helpful and beneficial to me. And I certainly hope that I can repay the favor one day.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for talking about yourself and about Goodwill. I hope that the audience donates and sees how they can assist y'all, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.